everybody. Let me clear the frogs out of my throat. It's so good to see this room completely packed. It's so good to see this room completely packed. I won't say it a third time, but I'm really happy to be here. Okay, so it's the 1980s. I'm 14 years old, and I'm on a Greyhound bus heading north up to Maine to see my brother Jay at his college. Heading up to Maine from Massachusetts, where I live with my parents, 14 years old. And what I want most in the world when I'm on this bus is for me and my older brother to be equals, to be friends. No more of this older brother, younger brother stuff. I want us to be on the same page. And hey, things are looking pretty good in that regard because, he's invited me up to his college, not for one night or 2 nights, but for a whole week. My whole winter break. Now, I know part of that is because he knows I'm struggling. I mean, if you take all the bad things that a kid can do, like the lying, cheating, stealing, smoking, letting their grades slip, all that stuff, by the time I arrive at 9th grade, I got that in high gear. And my parents, they can't believe a word that comes out of my mouth. And I can't really blame them. They also can't believe the relationship I have with my brother because they know him as the guy who can con me into buying boxing gloves so that when we get home, he can punch me right in the face. Or he's the guy who leaves me cringing and writhing in the corner of the cellar because he wanted the hockey puck just a little bit more than I did. Or he's the guy when I'm like making friends for us outside, he's like, he doesn't care about friends. He's just kind of sneering at me and throwing live firecrackers at my head. And the worst of it for me is that's all like just a Saturday afternoon. But also it's the ditching. When he gets older, he starts ditching me for his friends and he's ditching me for girlfriends. And I'm always wondering, that's the hardest thing for me to understand. Why doesn't he just ask me along? Well, you know what? Things are looking pretty good right now because my brother's, undergoing some serious change. He's always been this really big jock. He's got these broad shoulders. He's tall. He barely has to lift weights to make muscle. But he's quit the football team in Maine. And he's looking, the times he actually calls back home and I get on the phone, he's looking to fill in all that jockey space with other stuff. I got to read more books. Our conversations are getting totally upturned. I got to read more. I'd like to understand art a little bit better, he says to me. I'd like to understand me. I want to travel the world. I want to be a writer. It's a lot to show me all at once, and I don't, at age 14, really get my head around it. But it's my brother, and I know I'm going to hang on until I do understand it. And I also know, riding that bus up to Maine, that whatever my brother has going on right now, it's a lot bigger, that world, than what I've created in Massachusetts. And so with that, I barrel into his room, and I'm so happy to see him and meet his roommates. And his roommates, they're already laughing through their hands because they know exactly what's going to happen, what's going to come out of his mouth. He says, my girlfriend has her own place, and that's where I sleep. And when the keys land in my hand, the keys to his dorm, I know exactly what's going on. And he leaves. And I've gotten ditched again. And I'm looking out this window, and I'm like, why do I always fall for this shit? And I know my brother. I know I'm not going to see him very much this week, and I just kind of try to shrug it off. And I say, well, I might as well try to have a good time. And I learn about this party. And when the sun goes down, I show up there. And people are like, who is this 14-year-old kid who weighs 108 pounds asking for a keg cup? But that would be me. And there were several beers, and people stopped looking at me funny. They're asking me all kinds of questions. I'm like the center of a very special kind of attention. And after an hour or two, everybody's drinking beer. There are high fives and smiles. I'm making new friends. I'm trying to leave the place, After a couple of hours, I got to go. And some guy grabs me by my skinny neck, and he headbutts me. It's supposed to be like this Animal House moment, but, I'm reeling backwards, and I'm seeing stars, and I'm thinking, geez, that really didn't feel very nice. And I stumble out of the party and I make it back to my brother's dorm, okay? And he has like this corner suite, which means he has 2 rooms. And one of the rooms is just the bedroom. And the other room is like the hangout room and has a couple couches in it. And that's where I'm supposed to sleep this week. Except, when I wake up in the morning, I actually wake up in a bed. A really comfortable bed. And there's like feathers underneath me. And the comforter is got to be full of goose down, and it's really bright and white, and it smells so fresh. And I look over the edge, and I see I'm actually in an upper bunk, and I'm really loving where I am right now until I remember that I have no idea how I got here. And my mouth has never been so dry. It feels like a lizard came in the room overnight and took a shit in it. And my head is aching, and the worst of all is I just have no idea what's just happened to me. And I say, like, I got to get out of here. I got to figure this out. And I take the blanket back, and I see I'm actually not wearing any clothes. And I cover up again, and I'm just lying there. I'm just listening for footsteps and voices, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, who does this? I wound up in someone's room. It's definitely a woman's room, and I'm just like naked and like. But I have to go. I have to get over it. I don't know what I'm going to do right now, but I can't lie in this bed all day. And so I take the comforter off again, and I do my little twinkle toes, one rung at a time. With my little peak-freen hanging out, and I get down to the floor, and I'm very lucky because the first thing I see is a white bathrobe, and I put it on, and I cinch the tie around, and I'm just so happy to have some clothes on again. And as soon as I push my arms through the sleeves, I'm only 14, but I already have this really dark hair growing on my arm, and the sleeves. I mean, this robe is definitely for a woman because it ends at the elbows. And I look like a bear in a terry cloth robe, and I turn around and I see actually someone's been watching me the whole time in the bottom bunk. She's blonde and she's sitting up, and she's not from around here, I can tell, as soon as she starts to talk to me. Y'all, I don't know who you are, but when I got in last night, I tried to wake you up and you wouldn't budge. And y'all are so lucky my roommate didn't come in last night and see you sleeping in her bed, because she would have broken your neck. And I've got these like waves of shame just hitting me in the head. I'm like storm-tossed with shame right now, but I'm going to listen. I know she's only getting started, and I'm going to listen to it because I'm polite. And I have a couple of zits on my face. I have a metal chain around my neck. My hair still kind of has a feather to it. It's not the look the guys are going for on this preppy little campus. And I look young. I'm skinny. And she says, "You're obviously too young to be going to college here. What are you even doing here? Like, is this what you do? Who are you even here with? Who are you?" I said, "I'm here with John Mullen. I call him Jay. He's my brother." She has no idea who he is. I said, "Well, what about his roommates, Todd and Scott?" And when I say those 2 names, she has this pretty face, but it just like turns into this wizened crabapple. It goes, ooh, ooh. I don't know what that means. But I say, "Can you tell me how to get back to their room?" And she said, "They live right under this room. They're on the 2nd floor. You missed it by a floor, buddy." I said, I'm sorry this happened. I'm going to be on my way." And she says, "Wait a minute. Y'all, you can't be going off with my roommate's robe." And I turn around and I say, "Your roommate's robe, I know, but like underneath your roommate's robe right now, I'm not wearing any clothes." And she says, "What happened to your clothes?" And I said, "I don't know." And when I say that, she just smiles a little bit. And I leave, and I go down to my brother's room. And I swear to you, in this little college campus, this story about this 14-year-old, 108-pound geek drinking too much and whining, it's tearing through the campus. And by the time my brother comes home a couple hours later, he's heard it 3 different times. And I don't know how it lands on him because he doesn't say shit. And he just gives me this little half smile that he's been doing since we were little kids. And I still don't know what that means. And my brother, like I've said, he might be the biggest person on this campus, but to me, he's turning into like this meerkat. I'm like, which hole did he just go down? Because all of a sudden he disappears and he's gone and I don't see him. And a couple days later, I'm not going to tell you that this story turns me into a legend, but people definitely know who I am. They definitely know my name and they want to talk about what happened. And there were a couple of guys in this building who were like, hey, Kurt Mullen, you want to have some beers? I'm like, yeah. And so we have some beers, and then after that, I do this other thing that I can't do when I'm at home because the town I'm from in Massachusetts is just a little too rural for pizza delivery. I pick up the phone and I order a pizza to be delivered to this dorm. And I go downstairs and I stand at the door and I'm just looking out the window, like the glass on the door, at this wintry scene in Maine. And it's all kind of soft, And when people walk by and they're talking and laughing, it sounds like I'm listening to it from underwater, because there were several beers, and they're just softening the world for me, until I hear this voice behind me. What are you doing? It's my brother. What's he doing here? I didn't know he was looking for me. How many beers have you had today? Well, I'm sober enough to know that this isn't going to go well, because if there's one thing my brother likes to do with me, it's to lecture me. And so I collect my large pepperoni, and we go up to his room, and there's not a lot of togetherness between the brothers, for the last couple of days of my stay. And that's right, 2 days later, he takes me down to the bus stop, and he drops me off. And I get on the Greyhound, and as it's rolling away, I find him. He's like 19, almost 20. He looks great. And he's standing there with a friend of his, and he's not looking at the bus. He's looking away, and they're both laughing at something. And I just feel this sort of ache about the whole thing. Because Jay and I don't think I've said my brother's name. Jay and I, we've just spent a whole week together, but we really didn't spend it together. And as I'm watching him, I'm wondering, when are we ever going to get that chance again? Well, I go home, I go back to school. I'm a freshman, I'm struggling. And 3 days later, I walk through my kitchen, there's a letter on the table. It's for me. And my brother, he uses the same alphabet as you and me, but he can make the words look so angry. My name and address. I pick it up, and I go up to my room, and I open it. It's the first letter he's ever written me. And the tone of it, it's not anger. It's more concern. He says, I've noticed that you really aren't interested in anything anymore. And until you find something to get excited about, look, we're 2 guys, we're 2 brothers. We should have things to talk about. I don't know what to talk about with you. And until you find that thing, look, at least start reading the books that I care about, because then we can talk about those. And I fold the letter up and I put it back in the envelope, and I think, I'm not doing that. Because I don't read. At all. 3 days later, I'm still thinking about my brother, and I'm thinking about that letter, and I'm into music a little bit, and it's before the internet, but there's this book. I call up the Harvard Coop and I order it. It's about the drummer for The Who, Keith Moon. And on a Saturday, I take the train in to get it, and I tear through this copy of Full Moon. And immediately I call my brother. He gets on the payphone in the hallway of his dorm, and I say, I just read a book for the fun of it, for the first time because of you. And I said, it's not even a good book. It's not Faulkner, Joyce, and Hemingway. It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it's not even written by a real writer. It's written by this English thug who was a roadie for The Who. And you need like a glossary to get through it because the shit that comes out of this guy's mouth, it's all like slang, like Cockney, you know? And he's laughing, my brother, and I'm laughing. And it's like, it really is. It's like we're friends. It's a great phone call. And as we get into our 20s and 30s, there are so many more phone calls, and we're both readers. And, you know, if there's ever a lull in the conversation, there's always this connection, this point of connection. Hey, what are you reading? Anything good? And into his late 30s, my brother gets into outdoor sports, and he's into whitewater kayaking, and he goes out in a river one day, and he has this accident and is killed. And it's devastating. And it might be true what they say, that a day doesn't go by when you're not thinking about that person. And when I think about my brother, my thoughts can go in so many different directions because, well, he was such a big part of my life. I noticed that I really like to think about that letter and think about him, 19 years old, going back from that bus stop, sitting at his desk and thinking, you know what? He had the same concern, you know, that I did. He's thinking, we're two guys moving through life and we have nothing to talk about. We're two brothers. We could get through life without really getting to know each other. And he sat down at his desk and he wrote this letter because he wanted to do something about it. Thank you.